Welcome, everybody, to the show. This is Counterclipping show number 205 for January 13th, 2025. I'd like to thank everybody for coming by this evening. Our topic tonight is what choice of Wargame scale do you prefer and why? I know it says tactical on the banner, or on the thumbnail, but I kind of want to inquire as to what how folks feel about this in general, because I know we'll talk about my preferences as we go. We are drinking Ohio wheat whiskey. Now, this is from Middle West Distillery in Columbus, and unfortunately, this stuff is not nearly as good now as it used to be, and the rest of their product that I've tried is also, unfortunately, not as good as it used to be. This is made with 100% Ohio wheat, and is therefore, I think, interesting. We are clipping Advanced Squad Leader, still on the Italians. I did no off-week clipping this week. It just didn't happen for reasons. So we'll leave it at that. So I would like to remind everybody to like the video if you haven't already. Do subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. We're on Twitch too if you're over there, so follow on Twitch. I think subscribe option is not available on Twitch because I am not a partner. I am merely an affiliate over on Twitch because I don't care. So I'll also remind everybody that there's a bunch of links to support the show and the channel in the video description, so check those out. Big shout out to the patrons of Ardwulf Lair, without whose support and encouragement we would not be able to keep doing this, as well as our good friends at Noble Knight Games, the official sponsor of the Counterclipping show, from whom we will hear a short message later on. So, we do have, I got the ticker up. Let's say hello to Agray Day, Alistair Logie, B. Goebel, B. Red N, Bill Simone, Charles, Chet Bell, Christopher Smith, Daniel Silverthorne, Danny Seckery, Dave Poirier, David Imperato, David Zell, Doug Blayart, Ed Holtzman, Eric Goebel, Eric Hansen, Eric Schaefer, Grunyard Rich, Hexy is in the house. HUN644 New, the legend himself, Fucko, is in the house tonight. James Conway, Jason W., Jeff Anderson, Jeff Beeler, Jeff Edwards, Joe Hammond, Joe Okabayashi, Joe Mentum, John Clark, Carl Creeder from the Wargame Boot Camp. Kyle Harris, Lee Grant, Manders, Marty Sample is here, Meandering Mike, Michael Potts, Michael Simon, P51D Fan, Palmer Eldritch, Paul Dangle, Pawpaw, Percy Block, Perfidious Albion, Perry Spiropoulos. Holy cow, there's a lot of people here already. Rob Johnson, Robert O. Stacking Limit is here. Stigler is here. Stuka Joe's here. Joe, thanks for stopping by. The Commandant, Todd Cox, Tom MC, Tony Mammal, Vicky, welcome back to the show. William Bird. I apologize to anyone that I have missed. So there's all that. And Mike, how dirty are these damn things? They're not that dirty. I'll see if I can wait till after the show to clean the glasses. So anyway, the whiskey out of this bottle is pretty good, but I can't in good conscience recommend it anymore. So there's that. They also had actually some really good flavored, I guess we'll say enhanced vodkas with things like vanilla in them. And boy, those are just absolute mouthwash now. I'm not sure what happened with those. I think I'm going to open the door again because you may hear cats mewling, but I will sweat less. And right now, I am overheated. So probably because of the whiskey, to be honest about it, which I have been sipping on for about half an hour. So, all right. So this is day 45 of no tobacco for me, which is great news. Unfortunately, we've got some more bad news, too. And this news broke, and he's talking about it, so I'll say it, but I don't really have a lot of additional information other than this statement. It does appear that Roger McGowan, who lives in the Los Angeles area, has lost his home and studio in the fires in that area. I don't know anything else at this point. I know Roger's okay, but other than that, I do not have any additional news. So hopefully, Roger, hopefully it's just a question of waiting for a check from insurance, and that'll come, and that'll fix everything. But that isn't necessarily the case. So if there is something like a GoFundMe or anything like that, which I have no information or indication that any such thing is happening right now, I will say so on the show. So yeah, that's super bad. So, who knows what treasures were lost in something like that too. I don't know how much of his original art Roger's still got on hand, but wow, that's got to be amazing. Well, I don't. That's why I hedged my statement on that. I'm not counting on that. That is my hope, that it is just a question. So remember that GMT is nowhere near that. So not that they don't have wildfires up there too, but GMT is a couple of 100 miles at least from where like it looks like the friggin' apocalypse in LA right now. So, well, fast insurance claim is another story entirely. I just, I want Roger and his family and anybody else affected to be okay. So I think this is all correct, but one can hope on the basis of just sheer optimism, apparently. So in any case, so our best wishes go out to Roger and his family and anybody else affected down there. And keep your ears peeled for any assistance that might be warranted. Again, I have no information regarding that at this time. So, well, I know some of it is, but because of the book, because it would have had to have been digitized for the book. But Decision Games is in Bakersfield, which is generally down there. I have no idea whether Bakersfield is a place that is affected or not, however. So, I'm in a different chair because my other chair is, there we go. My other chair is broken. So, all right. Eric's Table, Napoleonic Battles. Thanks for coming by. I hope everything is okay down where you're at, because it's not for everybody. So, in any case, I watched 0 football games over the weekend. So, not even the Ohio State game I did not watch. I watched the highlights after the game, which I was satisfied with. So we got that coming up, I guess, this weekend. So we'll see what happens. They certainly could crap their pants on national TV again. So there's that. Faith in Ryan Day is a little on the low side, if you know what I'm saying. I think we will wash these, actually. All right, so right into the topic then, and I'm sure we will drift and meander as we always do. But so as I've said before, I tend not to prefer tactical games. I do make exceptions to that in the case of World War II or Napoleonics or, well, hey, this, or Civil War, maybe Ancients. I'm kind of lumping grand tactical in with tactical for the purposes of this discussion here. But I prefer operational games. I play my share of strategic games too, but I'm not necessarily leery of a strategic game. But it does probably have to be on a topic that I am already engaged with, right? World War II, World War I, the Napoleonic period, the American Civil War, that kind of thing. We did. We actually talked about this. Sorry, I didn't mention this again. The news broke. I think I heard about it on Tuesday morning, or Monday evening, and we did talk about it on the Chit Show on Thursday. I might have heard on Wednesday. So yeah, that was sudden and shocking, and nobody, and I hate to be the bad news show, right? But that Alan will be missed. His contributions were very substantial. A lot of people in the tabletop wargaming space don't necessarily realize just how big a deal Alan Emmerich was in the computer game space. He's one of the people that brought us, I mentioned this on the Chit Show. He's one of the people that brought us Master of Orion, a legendary computer space 4X game, and is in fact the person that came up with the term 4X. So a term that is used very widely in computer games and still is pretty well known in analog games as well. So as Mike says, Alan passed on Tuesday, and I think I might have heard about it on Tuesday. But I'm like, what's going on? I wasn't going to say anything and without like being sure. Because that's the last thing anybody wants to do is start saying something like that, and then it turns out to be bullshit. And unfortunately, that did not prove to be the case here. So Alan will be missed. We did have an interview with him on the Chit Show in October, so check that out. And if you want, watch the Chit Show from last week, where we talked to Brant about the Armchair Dragoons digital convention and some random stuff as well. All right. Are the Patriots actually in the playoffs? Because I kind of hope not, to be honest. In any case, Oh, yeah, that's right. Is that going on right now? I did not necessarily realize that was going on right now. That looks like a pretty cool event, by the way. IlBiotaCon in Spain. And looks like Joe is not live anymore, and he's here, so I'm not sure what's going on. Joe, if you're still here, pipe up and tell us what else is going on this evening from IlBiotaCon. I mean, it'd be cool to go to that convention. It just seems very impractical. Even aside from the fact that my Spanish is poor. It's not non-existent, but it's poor. So, January 23rd to 36th. So this is 36. That doesn't make any sense, Joe. What are you talking about? Okay, so I guess not. This is why I don't pay any attention to the NFL, by the way, because the Browns had something similar. That's how this sounds far more reasonable than that there was going to be some kind of yesterday's Enterprise time loop at the end of the convention. So, so that was Joe's pre-con show. So, Joe, thanks very much for filling us in on the dates of that. It does sound like a pretty cool event to me, and it's in sunny Spain as well. So my next convention will be the Armchair Dragoons digital convention. I'm going to throw a link to that in the chat right now if anybody wants to hop over. It is, and of course, the 17th. So that starts this Friday. I will be participating. Dan will be participating. Dan and I are going to do a special chit show. And there's a whole bunch of other pretty cool looking events. So check, and it's cheap, and you can do it from the comfort of your office at home. So it is worth a look. And if you're able to participate, I would encourage you to do so. So in any case, so I'm not a big fan of the Chiefs right now either, but, well, I don't know, but it is probably sunnier than here. So, this is true. The question is, when a situation like that spirals out of control. There are wildfires all the time as a matter of nature. So thank you, Eric Hansen. Much appreciated. So, anyway, so I was thinking earlier today about why I don't like tactical games as much as I like, operational games, or really even strategic games. I've got a number, let's say, of strategic level World War II games, for example. I've got World at War, World in Flames. I've got the ETO and PTO from TSR. Now, thanks to the folks who use the affiliate link, I've got ETO and PTO from Decision, which are much more complicated games. I've got War in Europe. I've got War in the Pacific. I've got a lot of strategic level World War II games, and a decent number of strategic level World War I games. Although almost all of those do kind of tend to play like operational games, right? You're moving individual units around, you're using a pretty standard CRT or something that doesn't depart too far from it. So now there will be people with just scheduling problems that can't do it for whatever. So LocalCon and Ventura, hopefully Ventura won't be on fire by the time you get down there. So I hope everyone has a safe and enjoyable weekend down there. Unless your weekend has already been wrecked. That is. So, without scrolling back upstairs here, which could take 10 minutes, I would love to hear what this idea is, because okay, I mean, this is all fine, but, why do we... what I'm asking is for us to kind of take a step back and analyze why we find a particular scale more enjoyable or more fun, if you want, than other scales. I've got Grand Tactical-ish, GBOH would be my obvious example anyway. I don't know, other than Commands and Colors Ancients, which is it tactical? Kinda. I don't know that I have a whole lot in the realm of Ancients tactical. I do have a couple of things that sort of fit into that space for Napoleonics. I have a couple of things that fit, 4 or 5 different things and by things, I mean whole series of games, of course. No, point-to-point is not a scale, but often, I'm not sure I've ever seen a tactical point-to-point game, but there's no reason you couldn't have one particularly. That just means I can't think of one off the top of my head right now. So narrative is I don't know. I think I can construct. I've read enough David Glantz to say I think I can build a little bit of narrative on a defender retreat result on the East Front than you might necessarily think. I mean, different people are into different things, and those things are going to speak to them, right? All right. So Mike likes the pentatonic scale. Roger says he loves Squad Leader until ASL, and it's been operational ever since. My preference is for operational, but I play some tactical, and I play a decent amount of strategic. Hopefully, we'll get through some of my list this year. That would be fabulous. Well, yeah, but I tend to see, and I think this is more because of designer bias than because point-to-point maps are necessarily better suited to some particular scale. I think it's just, inertia within in hobby thought, I guess, that we don't tend to see very many tactical point-to-point games. We've seen quite a few strategic level ones, and I can name a decent number of operational ones as well, so... Richard Coker tends to prefer tactical due to the lower counter density and length of time needed to play the game. Well, that depends on how tactical we're talking about, doesn't it? So if we're talking about ASL, you can easily find a dozen ASL scenarios, assuming you have as many scenarios as I do, which is like a fraction of the total available. There's a ASL scenario database that will let you look this stuff up, so you can find scenarios and the products that they're in. And those do, in fact, tend to be relatively compact. There's big exceptions. If you're doing Red Barricades, it's a little bit different, or The Last Bid would be one of the big scenarios from there. I'm going to scroll up, which means that I'm going to probably get backed up on the chat here. So I guess we're all living with that tonight. So I forgot where I was. Was I still on? Now I got to scroll down. Well, all right. Well, let's start back here with Richard's comment. Also, you tend to have relatively low unit counter density, at least. Although stacks can become kind of high, particularly if you're in a city or village fight where there's multi-story buildings and stuff like that. Your stacking can get a little bit crazy in ASL, but you're not normally talking about a huge number of actual units on the map unless you have chosen to play a large scenario, and in that case, you've got what you paid for. So, Jonathan Dyer says, wouldn't the Valiant Defense series tactical? Yeah, well, so there is, as I've said before, there is no topological difference necessarily between point-to-point and areas. I think, so of the Valiant Defense games, the only one I've played is Pavlov's House, and it's not really, movement is not, I would call it tactical just because of the topic, and that would apply, I'm pretty sure, to all the games in that series, at least all the ones that I could think of off the top of my head at the moment. I knew this was a music thing, but that's all I knew. But, maneuver is probably, it's reflected in Pavlov's House, but it's not like a particularly critical feature of the game, right? So I think a game designed like Valiant Defense, I think it could go any way the designer wanted to, whether it's points or areas or holding boxes or what have you. HUN644 News says his preference is whatever scale allows him to understand the historical context that the battle commanders faced. And I think for me at least, it's more a preference for operational stuff than it is a distaste for tactical stuff. Because again, I got a decent amount of tactical stuff, and I'm at least in principle willing to play more. Hell, I've even got some World War I tactical over here someplace waiting to get played. Not sure how that's going to go, but hopefully those designers have done a good job selecting their specific topics. I can feel this because one of the things that drives me to a particular game is for the dynamic model that the game presents on that topic, and this happens to be where my interest in the operational level of warfare tends to be where I am most interested. I am especially interested in the impact of logistics and command at the operational level. And that's one of the reasons why I took a big shine to BCS, at least once I started to actually understand what the hell I was doing, because it models all that stuff very elegantly. Dave Scott says, part of the appeal is related to how he imagines his role would be in the narrative. Is he a grunt or a general? I mean, certainly... and it's perfectly valid to say, you know, on Sundays I like tactical games, and on Tuesdays I like strategic games, and to have an equal preference for both. I just don't. So I have played relatively few naval and air war games. For example, right, these would be games that may not necessarily fit neatly in to the same scales that we associate with land war games. I mean, they do in a technical sense, but doesn't, like an air-to-air combat game is a tactical game. It doesn't feel like Elysia, right? So, or there's probably better ancient examples than that. But whatever the example, Drew Detterer says he likes the immersion and emergent play of tactical, but you can have emergent play or immersion for that matter, although it might be easier for a given person to gain immersion at some specific level, and I think that's completely legitimate. But emergent play can happen anywhere. I mean, emergent play can happen even in video games, at least some of the time. So usually that's because the developers didn't think of something. Eric Hansen says his favorite games of the past year are operational. Red Strike and Pendragon. Is Pendragon, we're talking about the coin Pendragon? Is Pendragon operational? I would... So, coin games, among many other examples, might not necessarily fit in a strictly... if you tried to strictly construct definitions of tactical, strategic, and operational, they might not cleanly fit. I do think that Pendragon feels a little more operational and a little wargamier than some other coin games. Jeff Beeler likes games with uniquely designated units best. There's plenty of those. Even strategic level games, in fact, World in Flames, for example, which is now, by the way, available through Noble Knight. So if you've been waiting on a copy of Noble Knight or a copy of World in Flames, they've got a new 2024 collector's edition, and I think a collector's deluxe, and maybe more. I have it, so I did not investigate closely. Many Doctors says that sequence of play design is central to innovation and interest for him. I mean, the sequence of play is really important to the way war games get designed. Sequence of play is really, really important. I want to say something else about this, actually, because it's not a really strong dislike, but I'm not crazy about, even if there are historical designations on the units, if they all have cookie-cutter values. I'm not sure I appreciate that. Although, I will say at certain scales, like, say, the strategic scale, maybe it doesn't make much sense to vary the factors very much. WIF does, but it's a little bit silly the way it works at that scale. So it's just a thing we decide, yeah, well, whatever, it's fine. So, all right, Drew says that Raid on St. Nazaire is P2P tactical. P2P. Peer-to-peer tactical? That's what's in my head there. Randy says that operational games tend to be less complicated than tactical and strategic games, generally speaking. Well, I think I see where you're coming from there, and I don't think that's wrong. However, if you looked in here, you might come to a different conclusion. Let me put it that way. There are plenty of complicated operational games, and there are some number of relatively straightforward and simple tactical and strategic games. One example of a simple tactical game might be Commands and Colors, any kind you want, if you want to call it tactical. An example of a very easy and light, but still, wargamey feeling games. A strategic game might be the No Peace Without Spain games from Compass, which I have all of and have not played any of. So that's another thing that's not on the list. Hope maybe it'll get done this year. We'll see. Rogue77 says tactical doesn't include things like supply. Typically, that's right. However, isn't like a low ammunition status a supply issue? And we see that in GBACW. We see that I think we see that in Line of Battle at least somewhere. And we absolutely see it in ASL if you got guys with low or no ammo or something like that. So I'm really trying to think of air games that I've played that aren't flat top, and none of them are from this phase in my wargaming hobby life. They are all from like back in the 90s or earlier, if there are, and ironically, I didn't play flat top back then. Now, see, Dustin Mitchell says, is it tactical versus operational, or is the issue that tactical games tend to have more fiddly rules? And again, I think that is a conclusion that you can reasonably draw based on a subset of games you might have experienced, but it isn't necessarily generically true. Certainly, the tactical games that I have tend to be the ones with the fiddly rules, but that's frankly true of the operational and strategic games too. I've got a decent number of light war games, but that's kind of by accident. And often there was some specific feature in a game like that led me to buy it, even though it's not necessarily at my preferred complexity. So, no thank you. We will be playing GTS Utah Beach at Winterfest and having a great time instead of clawing our own faces off in frustration at the fact that they didn't play test that at all. So, Stigler says that tactical is almost always higher complexity than operational and strategic. And again, I think it's my selection bias, saying that I don't really feel like that for operational games are necessarily simpler. But again, that's because those are the kinds of games I like to play. I could name a dozen GMT games, and probably I could only fill half that list up with Mark Simonich titles that are operational games and which are medium complexity at most. So, now Kyle Harris loves them all, and I sympathize with this. At the same time, I am kind of glad I have more of a preference for operational games because I feel like it's saving me money, which is of course bullshit. So there's that. Well, this doesn't really bother me, to be honest. We'll see how I do with the 5/8" counters in questionable lighting conditions at Winterfest. The good news is Winterfest is 20 minutes from here now. So if need be, I can bring this lamp from home or additional lamps from home. So it's not really going to be a huge deal if the lighting sucks, which I kind of expect it to be honest. Joe Green says he likes tactical games. Even though the rules are more complicated, they can visualize what's going on. That makes sense too, especially if you're like contextualizing or like in the mind's eye, you're sort of contextualizing the action in the war game to what you might have seen in a war movie, right? Which I think a lot of people do. I don't, but I haven't seen as many war movies as a lot of wargamers have, frankly. And I've read a lot of books, so there's that. John Stanley says, it depends on location and conflict. I think you're trying to say you greatly prefer World War II Pacific at the operational level. The thing is, I don't know, there's some Coral Sea games that would be considered operational. Second World War at Sea, for example, I would be inclined to call tactical, but it's a weird hybrid too. Same thing with flat top. When I think World War II Pacific operational, I mind immediately to Pacific War, which allows you to play basically any piece of the Pacific War at the operational level, up to the entire thing if you want and have that kind of time, and are that dedicated to the game. I would not. That is not a thing I would be willing to play in a month at Winterfest. You could talk me into playing a relatively short campaign scenario, but not the whole shoot match, because there's too many opportunities to screw things up. All right, Midi Doctor says some operational games are information dense and people like the Chrome. Some people do like the Chrome. I don't want to, I could spend the next hour talking about complexity again, but I've done it before, so I don't really feel like I need to. Did Mark show up before I mentioned Pacific War or after? So Mark, thanks for stopping by. I'm shooting forward all the way to the current chat here. REF, I think, is more operational than strategic. I would apply the same logic to the Burning Blue, which I'd say is more operational than tactical, even though there are some tactical elements in it as well. Believe it or not, somebody bought me a headlamp for Christmas. That might be coming to Winterfest with me. So we'll see. All right, Doug says, I had at one point, Doug says he seemed to have a series game for each, tactical ASL, operational BCS, etc. I am immensely sympathetic to this, and because I am OCD, I, of course, have constructed a huge spreadsheet of specific historical periods broken down appropriately and tried to fill them all up with games I either have or could reasonably get, and that is complete nonsense. I mean, at least for me, I simply could not be that organized. So, Zero from the card game. Yeah, I've never actually played that. I have that. Christoph de Klerk says, tactical has moral and individual decisions. I mean, I guess you could see it that way. I'd have to think a little harder about how that would actually emerge in actual play. Well, I am completely comfortable just not buying third-party ASL stuff. And that is not to say that they are all crap. Some of it is really quite well regarded. But I just, as a budgeting matter, no. I'm not even buying all the historical modules. I'll buy the journals. I'll buy special ops. I'll buy a core module if they do another core module. And if they do another, say, Stalingrad historical module, I'll be happy to buy that. But I didn't buy Manila. I didn't buy St. Maraglice. I had both of those on order at one point and canceled those orders. So that was a decision that I made. Oh, that sounds kind of fun. And actually, Tide of Iron sounds like the kind of game that would be good at that, to be fair. All right. Kelly's Heroes. I've never seen Kelly's Heroes from beginning to end. I've seen clips of it. But I've never actually seen the entire movie. So, all right. Perry Sparapolis says, bigger conflicts model better operationally than small conflicts. Yes, but I'm not sure. Maybe there's a deeper point that is eluding me. That is always possible. So let's say there was a thought experiment at one point, and I'm not sure if this was Dean or somebody else, about doing the like a bulge scenario. I'm trying to remember what this is in the context of. A bulge scenario for like a pretty big Europe type game. And he's like, this is going to be like 12 hexes. Right? Now, you could do a game like that, but is it a game that you'd like play a lot? Not necessarily. I could be wrong. There could be some postcard games that really blow my pants off, but I can't think of one off the top of my head. Mark describes Empire of the Sun as strategic, and I'm inclined to agree, given the specific implementation of scale. But almost all, well, I'm not saying almost all, but many war games do kind of tend to scope drift a little bit into the next level up, or more commonly the next level down of scale. So, all right, Brant says, high tactical, low operational for him. Zoomed in enough to really blow shit up, but zoomed out enough that you still need good combined arms warfare and advanced planning. That's another thing that I like about operational, is it tends to reveal things like combined arms and leveraging different types of forces to do different things. Another thing that BCS is really good at. OCS is okay at it too. It's just that you're tracking points as well. So there's that. Freddy Salvian says, playing a large game like Streets of Fire on the Battle of Stalingrad is mind-boggling for those who are used to small-scale tactical firefights. So imagine, if you will, then, Red Factories, which is 4 oversized maps in all cities, factories, and that kind of stuff in Stalingrad, and campaign scenarios that would probably take as long as any reasonable comparable monster game, where you might play it for 6 months or a year and a half or something like that. That's completely reasonable to expect if you're playing something like that. It's enormous. I've never even seen the whole thing set up. I have seen Red Barricades set up because I've played a little bit of that back in the day. Not much. Because it's a project, right? Brant says, highest level where kinetic stuff really matters, and the lowest level where you need a staff to coordinate things. Oh, perhaps. Lee Grant, thanks so much for the support. It is much appreciated. He is happy to be able to read the small numbers on counters. I am increasingly bad at that. Does anyone use the lighted magnified viewers to look at counters? I don't, but I have seen people do so. In fact, at Origins this year, if you watch my Origins dealer's room walkthrough, I passed by that booth and at least mention it, and they've been there before. They actually make what look to me like jeweler's glasses that are intended for people painting tiny miniatures, but seems to me you could also use them for counters, although I did not conduct any experiments in that regard. So once again, Lee Grant, thanks so much. I do find that good lighting helps a lot, and there probably is such a thing as too much light too, to be fair. This game room, man, the glare off the plexi is just crazy, and I've got the reduced glare plexi, which I'm not, it doesn't help that much. So magnifying glass is good with LEDs. Yeah, I mean, or the little tweezers with the little flashlight in it too. The first thing I did when I bought those was take that out and throw it in the trash. I didn't think I needed it at the time. If I'm having a lighting issue, I'm going to bring a lamp, right? Ideally, right? I mean, if I wasn't going to fly a lamp to San Diego with me. And in fact, the lighting, the worst thing I had to say about the convention was the lighting in that facility. I do think some kind of small portable LED desk lamps probably ought to make it into people's luggage if they're heading out to SD HistCon. I mean, I am appreciative that somebody did all of D-Day basically in ASL, because, you know, that's a neat idea. That's cool that they did that. I just have relatively low confidence in Critical Hit as a competent organization to put out decent product. So although the maps are generally fine, I'm not sure about the counters so much. This is also true. Brant's talking about the new Battles for the Ardennes Deluxe that Decision just put out pretty recently. I think they've upgraded it to 5/8 inch counters, just like they did for Operation Typhoon, which, you know, hey, my eyes aren't getting any younger, right? So I appreciate that kind of thing. Am I still on the full squads here? All right, director's cut of Kelly's Heroes. I obviously I need to see it. I'm aware of this lack in my education. I bought when I got the chainsaw, I'm like, there's no way I'm using this fucking thing with no eye protection. So because no safety glasses fit over these. Okay, I could get prescription safety glasses, of course, but I'm not inclined to go spend $200 on that. So what I actually bought was a helmet with a retractable visor that I can just drop the whole thing down and protect my face. Even running the Weed Whacker, I tend to get schmutz everywhere from that. So, all right. Mean Joe Green says, Cross of Ironhead rules for which armies could execute prisoners. I have never dealt with prisoners in ASL. I have no idea or insight as to how the rules work on that. So okay, that is working still. That's cool. 20 minutes. That's quite a bit, actually. That's quite a bit of added footage. That's almost as much added footage as like the Fellowship of the Ring. David Imperato, The Dirty Dozen was on, and that is a fun movie. That is a very enjoyable. Is it a war movie? Not really, but it is a war-themed action movie. I'll put it that way. At some point, though, you've got to decide how much energy you're willing to put into this kind of prescriptive language arguments. So, Christoph Clerk says how to put individuals and their morale in a game, which is handled in a good way in combat. I think this is a response to a post that I have missed. So, Prophetic Albion says you can get the magnifying glasses with LEDs that you wear. If there's some kind of clip-on arrangement, that might be something I would think about. So, here we go. That's what I said. So, of course, Mark told me this, so that's why I say that. But, so there's that. Danny Secretary played the ASL scenario for Hogan's Heroes. It's actually pretty good. Oh, and there is, by the way, a ASL scenario for Castle Itter, which I would be interested in seeing how that was done. I have no idea where that can be found. I could look it up. Nobody needs to go look it up and tell me. Now I'm generally okay with half-inch counters. However, there's a lot of variables. There's light, there's distance, right? If I'm playing some enormous monster game and I'm 2.5 feet from the counters and the light's maybe not as great as it could be, there's no way I'm going to see those factors. There's just no way. I'll have to lean way over and it's going to be super uncomfortable and my back will be killing me in a half an hour. So on the other hand, when we played Atlantic Wall, we had the maps separated in such a way that we had the beach maps on one table and like the southern maps on the other table. So I was right on top of the beach. It was great. I had no problems with counter handling or counter visibility or any of that. Now, admittedly, we had okay lighting in that particular part of the room. But I am happy for Christoph de Klerk. My eyesight is bad. I suppose there are people with worse eyesight that aren't legally blind, but probably not that much worse. My wife is pretty much convinced I can't see anything but light and dark without my glasses on. And if I don't know where I set the glasses down, good luck. That's going to be I need some assistance type of situation. So more direct light wouldn't help as the glare off the plexi. Yeah, I feel that. I would like to get what I think are called torchiere lamps. Those are the lights. You used to see these in the 90s all the time, and now they're kind of hard to find. You can get them on Amazon, of course. That like bounce the light off the ceiling. I'd like to try that in here, but I unfortunately don't have as many outlets as I would like. And there's only like 3 places where something like that could be plugged in, unless I run cords, which I could do, right? It might be worth the experiment, but I also don't necessarily want to go buy 6 of them without knowing whether they will work or not. This device, so I have seen this, okay? It is like a tiny suction cup that you can use to pick up individual counters. I see several obstacles to this being efficient. One, it's only picking up one counter at a time, where a pair of properly tweaked tweezers will pick up an entire stack at a time. And then they'll fall out of the tweezers and you'll have to pick them all up anyway, but not all the time. That will sometimes happen. There was a guy, not 100% sure this was a guy, to be honest, that used to play war games at local Northeast Ohio conventions. The way they would pick up counters is they would lick their fingertips and tap the counter hard and pull it up like that. That person is never handling a game that I am playing or own. So, because that is unsavory, in my opinion. DJ Flippy pictures oneself fearing a machine gun alley in the streets of Stalingrad, feeling viscerally how terrain and decision-making would matter and how those things could determine life or death. The cool thing about, I've never played Streets of Stalingrad, but one of the cool things about that is, as a situation, is sort of the three-dimensionality of this scenario, right? You've not only got buildings, some of which at least might potentially have multiple floors, but you've also got basements and sewers and all that kind of stuff. And that makes, I think, that a really interesting tactical situation. On the other hand, if you're playing the whole Red Factories package, is it tactical? Because, I mean, if you just look at what these 2 or 3 units are doing, sure, of course it's tactical, and the game is by definition tactical. But haven't you zoomed out so much at that point that you begin to become operational? So, all right, Eric Hansen is aware on some level that Empire of the Sun is strategic, but he tends to put more effort into conducting operations and making strategic decisions on the cards. Well, I think that makes complete sense. You're probably doing it right. I've never seen it I won't say I've never seen it happen. I will say I have never personally been in a game that it happened in. But bear in mind, I have not played much ASL since the 90s. And just when I was like legitimately getting back into it and like playing occasionally, then the pandemic hit and screwed all that up. So Albion has recollections of playing Panzerkrieg. The stacks are obscenely high and the lines are very crowded, worse than OCS. I mean, this is, I was not really aware of tweezers for wargames being a thing until probably the mid-90s. Approximately the same time, I learned that clipping the corners of your counters was an actual thing that people do. I had not only never seen that before, I had never heard of that before. Because I was almost always, not always, but almost always when I was growing up, the kid with the war games, right? I didn't have a crazy number, but I had like a dozen war games or something like that. That made me feel pretty good at the time. And I'd never heard of anything like that. Grand operational? Well, if you ask Joe Youst, I think he would say yes. On the other hand, I think the Grand Operational Simulation series, GOS, is just operational. I'm not sure what's grand about it other than that the games are really huge, which is fair, okay? So I can live with that. I have not seen that. When you mentioned it, Charles Latour, my mind immediately went to The Keep, which, of course, is a very different movie. No, there is no production system in Empire of the Sun, if somebody hasn't already mentioned this. There's a reinforcements on a schedule, and there's a little bit of I don't want to say randomization, but there's a little bit of variability in when certain units come up and based on the war in Europe and that kind of stuff. So, games that let you control all 3 levels. Speaking of this, Drew, I will have a video at some point, I don't know that it's going to be particularly soon, on a new storage solution for Federation and Empire in my case, but I may use it for Starfleet Battles too. But bear in mind, it's not my intention to accumulate an enormous quantity of Starfleet Battles stuff. Imperial Starfire, somewhere on this shelf right here, is my Imperial Starfire rulebook. And Starfire is a very simple, very easy, almost like a super stripped down, much more so than Federation Commander, starship combat game that you could easily run like a whole fleet just with one person. You could run 10 ships, 15 ships, wouldn't be that much of a problem. It's that easy to play. On the other hand, Imperial Starfire, which is like the strategic level system that sits on top of that, is absurdly complicated, and I suspect it would be a lot easier to run if you were to, say, build a program to do it in Python. So, States of Siege games, an entire front of multiple armies reduced to a single counter. Yes, it's strategic, right? One can. I wonder, there's a number of games. Well, let me think about that a little more before I say something and sound stupid. Ooh, Alistair Logie just had cataract surgery. Hopefully that you won't have any complications from that. I don't know if that's a thing, a surgical or laser solution. That's probably something to ask about. I do need to go to the eye doctor. Eric Hansen, favorite Napoleonic games are operational, which is interesting because there's not that many Napoleonic operational games. There's not none. And there's a whole series from Kevin Zucker, The Campaigns of Napoleon, which Napoleon at Bay is an example of. But generally speaking, we don't really have that much operational stuff kind of in the pre-Civil War gunpowder era. There's not nothing, but there's not as much as I would like, especially in an otherwise very well represented period like Napoleonics, right? So, Perfidious Albion clarifies that where you study, I don't have cataracts as far as I know. My eyesight just sucks. You do have to get those surgically removed. So that would be awesome. I have astigmatism and something else. Dave Scott, I'll send you a picture of the tweezers, and you can look on Amazon for those kinds of tweezers. They are surgical tweezers. I believe they are 8 inches long. The ones I like, and of course I don't have one here right now. Somewhere on this, there we go. These are the ones I like. I prefer the ones with the bent tips like this. Also, as soon as I get them, I take a pair of pliers and I bend the tines, the ends of the tines in just a little bit. Like an eighth of an inch in would be way too much, more like a 16th of an inch in. I put a little block right here where I'm going to stick my finger, and I just squeeze with a pair of pliers until they're just a little bit tighter. And then if they, normally when you get them, they're about 2/3 of a half-inch counter. I will normally spread them apart a little bit too, so you can get them around counters a little more easily and use them also with larger counters. So, excellent, Stephen Rochelle, wing leader. That's awesome, actually. So that's great. That's fantastic. Yeah, that's what everybody said. We're like, what the fuck? Ugh. Well, if you're 12, I'll make some allowances, but I'm still going to tell you, you're still probably getting hit with the ruler. Let me put it that way. Yeah, everybody agrees with this. I tend not to do this unless I absolutely have to be honest. Usually I can make it work without the extra trouble, because it is a little gross. On the other hand, if it's like my book, I don't care. So I still don't do it very often. It's just not my... Well, Danny, I got to disagree with you on this one, because I've seen Europa being played on the Eastern Front, or even on the Western Front for that matter. And the stacks are absolutely insane. I think I worked out that according to the current Europa stacking rules, which were originally introduced in First to Fight, I think I worked out that you could potentially, if you like, the maximum number of land units you could contain in a single hex. This does not count area units. This does not count markers. It does not count supply. It does not count anything. It doesn't count interdiction or any of those other markers that you might use. This is land units. Is like 21. You could have up to 21 counters in a hex. Now, it was a more straightforward and less obviously abusable and egregious originally. Well, I guess I shouldn't say originally. I will say in Fire in the East, which is what I've got. I don't have Dragnok Austin, and I have no interest in having Dragnok Austin. I've seen this before, and I just got to assume that somebody wasn't thinking when they sent the files to the printer, which is obviously not the way they did it for Panzerkrieg. But boy, this would be awesome. Like I said, maybe I should ask. Ugh. This isn't really like a military engagement, though, is it? There are some, there are certainly ASL scenarios in that area at that period, that, like the prisoner situation, no, I would consider that to be, maybe you're not interpreting the statement the same way I am. Let me put it that way. So I clip all the counters, except for how the stuff that Blue Panther prints, where it's on that thick whatever it is. That stuff I do not clip. It can be done. I have experimented on extras, but that was just a fun experiment to see if I could do it. It is not practical, and it is not worth your time. And the density in those games tends to be low enough that who cares? You don't really need it. Oh, I saw that. That looked like a professional simulation, though. Am I wrong about that interpretation, Brant? So Brant posted some pictures about this thing, and that was Panzerblitz? I'm not sure I recognize that was Panzerblitz. That stacking. Maybe we're talking about different images, because I remembered a lot of counters, but I remembered those counters spread over a lot of hexes. Eastwind Rain. I have now obtained a copy of Eastwind Rain, and I am actually looking forward to examining it. It is another one of those games that I would really like to explore for its mechanics. More so than that I think it's necessarily a gangbusters game. I mean, they're literally arguing about this on Facebook right now, is whether to clip your counters or whether clipping your counters is some form of Manichaean heresy of something like that. I will sleeve cards if I think the game is going to get played a lot, or if there's like an undue amount of card handling or something like that. Titan. Titan doesn't really, I mean, there's a sense in which this is true, of course, but I also think that this terminology starts to lose its relevance when we start talking about games like Titan. If you know what I mean. And it's not necessarily because it is not a like military simulation. It's because of just what the kind of game that it is. And I don't mean because it's a fantasy game. I mean the way the game actually functions, where you've got a Titan and it moves around and can recruit things in various hexes, and then you have battles. But certainly it also does straddle a couple different levels too, right? Because you've got that big global map, I'll call it. It's not a world, it's just a map with shapes on it. And then when you actually have a battle, you pull out a battle mat for the terrain of that particular space, and then you fight the battle out. And that's, of course, why Titan takes an awful long time to play. Paris Baropoulos says he saw a documentary that said the biggest and most successful military operation in history was Operation Bagration. And I'm aware that that is not the correct pronunciation of either the operation or the general. But... maybe. By what metrics do we make this statement? Because one could find metrics by which you could easily demonstrate this, right? But you could say D-Day, which went reasonably smoothly in a lot of places, not everywhere. You could say the first day of Operation Market Garden went very smoothly. At least the airdrops went very smoothly. But Stephen Rochelle runs Strategic Starfire and Excel spreadsheets. You could do this. You could set up an Excel spreadsheet to do that. And it is easier to because this way Excel is your UI. You don't have to worry about it. This is why I did my Traveler world generation spreadsheets in Excel rather than writing something for it, because I would have had to come up with a UI of some kind, and I have no experience doing that kind of coding at all. So. Plus Zulu's on the ramparts, too, right? Brandt mentions that not all States of Siege games are strategic. There was one on the Alamo, which I haven't seen, but I'm aware of Zulu's on the ramparts, which is a States of Siege game. That is definitely tactical, right? Oh, nice. Mike, I want to talk to you about play-by-mail games at some point. Not tonight, but at some point. Because I was into play-by-mail games right around 1990 to 92. And then when I actually started gaming with like humans that were in the room, the desire to play play-by-mail games kind of went away. Probably 87 to 90 would be actually probably a better guess. So, this sounds fabulous, by the way. Grand Strategic Napoleonic. So yeah, that is a pretty good, apt description of Empires in Arms. There are, of course, a number of other examples. Where am I putting these? Of strategic level Napoleonic games. You can play War and Peace that way, for example, but it's never been particularly good at that particular thing. The scenarios are great. It's a good game. I just don't think the grand campaign, I think it inevitably falls apart. At least if you try and do it multiplayer, let me put it that way, which is a kind of a big caveat. There is Alliance, which I just did a video on, that just came out from Colombia. That's a brand new release, from like in the last month. And it looks pretty spiffy. It looks like it's very easy to play. There's like 6 pages. Look at the unboxing video. It's very streamlined. It is multiplayer. That is a combination you might not necessarily see. I might take it to Winterfest, and see if I can get a 6-player game of it going on in the evening, or 7. I think it's up to 7 actually. Agincourt. Well, Agincourt, I mean, any game that is about a specific battle, unless it's like the Battle of the Bulge, which is really a campaign, right? Even though we call it a battle. Any game about a battle, which is a specific set of forces meeting in a specific place to conduct this particular battle on a specific date, is probably going to be tactical. Now, there's some flexibility in terms of granularity there, right? The Blue Tweezers. Blue Tweezers has a great channel for one thing, but I've never tried to use those kind of plastic tweezers. I think somewhere around here I do have a pair of 3D printed plastic tweezers, but I was not really thrilled with them. I have seen these kind of. That's a good point. Decision Games sells them too, and I think Multiman might sell tweezers, but I'm not sure they sell them on the website. They might just sell them in the at like conventions and stuff. I have always bought tweezers from Amazon. I have bought a couple of pairs from the Gamers back in the day, and I bought a couple of pairs from Doc at Decision at Origins or something, and all my other tweezers, and I have like 30 pairs of tweezers, have been bought from Amazon. So, Ottoman Sunset. I have not really looked at Ottoman Sunset. So I got tweezers like that too. Maybe I should have done a show on tweezers. I also have, these came with these sort of spade-tipped tweezers. These came with rubber tips on them, and I hated that. So I actually took the rubber tips off, and I feel like they actually work a little better. But because there's rubber tips came on them, the insides of the ends of the tweezers are completely smooth. So sometimes I'll go to pick counters up, which these are very good at, but then the counters, because there's no friction in there, the counters will spin between the tines of the tweezers and the whole thing will fall onto the table, which is pretty irritating, actually. Stegler, perhaps you have a higher dexterity score than I do, but I am pretty worthless at managing half-inch counters in a lot of the games I play without tweezers. And I'm specifically thinking of OCS here. And I'll use tweezers for GTS too, which doesn't have nearly the density or nearly the stacking, usually. And Danny Segary reminds us all to smash that like button. I'm going to try and get caught up on the chat here, folks. While we have a brief message from the official sponsor of the Counter Clipping Show, our good friends at Noble Knight Games. If I can find the friggin' tab. I wish I could put hot buttons on StreamYard, but I can't. So take it away, Noble Knight. We'll be back in 30 seconds.
Here at Noble Knight Games, we've been carefully growing the world's largest selection of board games, role-playing games and dice, war games, miniatures and paints, card games, and more. Going on 25 years now. Our rustic castle contains more game and hobby goodness than you can shake a stick at. Complete with careful packaging and the finest customer service the land can provide. You can buy, sell, trade from anywhere in the world, just like nature intended. Noble Knight Games.
All right, so now I did not get super duper caught up on the chat during that 30 seconds, actually, because there's some things I wanted to actually read, and I didn't just shoot all the way to the bottom, although I was tempted. Did I miss a super chat? I did. John Stanley, I apologize. It looks like this was like 2 minutes ago, so I just hadn't seen it yet. Operation Watchtower was a military operation that has strategic, operational, and tactical surprise for the U.S. forces. And interestingly, there are a couple of games on it. There's the Operation Watchtower. I'm not 100% sure this is out, from Diffraction Entertainment, which covers a lot more than just that. And there's an SL historical module for Operation Watchtower, which obviously you're not going to see those strategic elements in that, except perhaps in a rather abstract way. So once again, John Stanley, thanks so much for the support. It is much appreciated. You did indeed, unless plans have changed and I didn't get the news, which is not impossible, you did in fact hear correctly, Jonathan Dyer. Compass will be doing a new version of Eastwind Rain. I think that's a Mark McLaughlin design. Am I right about that? So Brant clarifies about the pictures he shared. That's a pro anything, a bunch of nut jobs put together, 24 Panzer Blitz boards. I mean, I don't think this is crazy at all. So I don't know what you're talking about, Brant. The old card. Hey, you play how you can play, right? It's more important to play than not play live or Vassal or whatever. If that's your option or your preference, but you're playing, who cares? So, yeah. Well, Roger Henseth says, in the old days, he thinks designers thought an accurate order of battle gave your game historical accuracy and resulted in large stacks. I can definitely agree that some designers did, in fact, feel that way. And Europa is the obvious example, right? Where you've got all the huge quantity of ants floating around. And to some extent, it's kind of a feature of the game. Some people like all the ants. I think it makes play of it take a lot longer than it should. So So Stigler doesn't mind if somebody else does the work, but he doesn't want to sully his very clean hands with the filth of counter clipping dust. This is absolutely right. You tend to in history or on the real battlefield, you seldom see balanced battles. Because it is a bad commander who seeks out a fair fight. He wants an unfair fight. And the same thing applies to Titans. So you do see a lot of small hexes that you just get stomped. And there may be an optional rule, or even in the main game, where you can just roll it instead of having to figure it out, which frankly I would probably do. I think the global map, I think, is the more interesting gameplay, personally. On the other hand, the tactical maps remind me of Archon. If anybody remembers the game Archon. Video game, I played it on the Commodore 64, and it was pretty cool. So it's interesting, Perfidious Albion, that you should mention that maybe if they create a 3D level to the Titan map, that would be awesome. Multiple levels of play. I draw your attention to Dragon Magazine issue number 100, which was a kind of a big deal episode when it happened. Or issue, because Gary Gygax had just come back and said, "Oh, I'm going to unfuck all this," and he was gone in like a year, or something like that. It might have been 2 years, but something like that. But in that, Gary was a big chess buff, and in that, he liked chess variants too, which a lot of chess buffs don't. At least the people I've talked to. But there is a chess variant in there called Dragon Chess, which is pretty interesting looking, and it is played on literally 3 different boards representing the world in the middle, the sky on the top board, and the underworld in the bottom board. It's pretty cool. I have no idea if it's really playable or not. I can vouch that it'd probably be, with things like Hero Builder and stuff like that, it'd probably be a lot easier to like put them, like what you needed to play it together now than it was whenever that came out. And I would bet that the rules for Dragon Chess are on the internet somewhere. Ooh, Brian Lindsay mentions James Bond Assault from Victory Games. I remember this vaguely. I never played it. I think there were 2 or maybe 3 James Bond board gamey type tie-ins, something like that. Maybe, but what criteria are we using to say that? Okay, but you're just saying that. I'm not sure that tells me much. Oh, now see, I am picky. This is why I bought all these expensive tools, folks. So that they can also look nice and not look like they were clipped by a crazy person with a hand axe. So, well, this is true too. Remember that some games, these aren't too bad, but there's significant fuzzy parts on these modern ASL counters from MMP. But I think that MMP might just be assuming that everybody's clipping their counters. I know not everybody does. I have played OCS with unclipped counters, briefly. And in one of those cases, I brought the clipper the following week and started clipping. And by the time we finished with that game of Guderian's Blitzkrieg 2, the whole thing was clipped. So, admittedly, Fucko had a hand in that too. He was also clipping at the time. So that's one reason why we got it done in just a couple of weeks of clipping. Because if it's the other guy's turn, I'll just sit there and clip counters. I mean, I'd probably be doing that anyway, right? I also find that clipped counters are just easier to handle. I'm not sure I can explain that, but I tend to fumble clipped counters less often than unclipped counters. So Danny says that Empires in Arms is the greatest 7-player game ever made that you can play for a whole year in real life. We have talked several times now about doing Empires in Arms as a side game at Winterfest. And I think the problem with that is, I'm not sure it makes a good side game. Particularly when only like 1 or 2 people of those 7 know how the game works. That sounds like and that's one reason why we just didn't get very far. We got like halfway through a turn or something like that. It was very, very little exposure to Empires in Arms. Because of the kind of game that it is, you really do want at least 5 or 6 people to play that. And it takes a while. And how I've seen it played, we had a local game store up in here in Northeast Ohio called Recess Games. And when I actually worked there in a pre-incarnation of the store for a couple of years in the early 90s. So, but they're still, I think, still around. There was anyway a Empires in Arms group that met up there, and I just happened to be in the store. I was like, "What are you? This is Empires in Arms. What the fuck are you guys doing?" None of those people were wargamers. They were all RPG people and Magic the Gathering people, and it was full. Those people were engaged and super into it. So I do think that something like Empires in Arms has the potential, at least, to reach across the common boundaries of the hobby. I've said in the past, and I think this is debatable, but you might. I said I don't consider it a war game. I consider it Cosmic Encounter with a Napoleonic skin. I mean, and to some extent, I think that's true. I probably will get hate mail about that, but bring it. I don't care. I was getting hate mail before anyway. I never did the War of the Ring PBM, but I did Hyborian Wars for a while. That was pretty cool, I thought at the time. Anyway. There you go. The War of the Digits. That sounds like a great idea. Yeah, this is true, and that's why I got to go to the eye doctor. So, Mark says that they tested the model Agincourt with cardboard in hand-to-hand combat in the conference room. There you go. Yes, you may absolutely. I would not expect and this is another reason why I semi-seriously say it's not a war game, is it will instantly go off the historical rails. Empires in Arms, you could do all kind of crazy stuff. But that kind of tends to be a Harry Roland thing. I mean, you could do all kind of crazy stuff in World in Flames too, right? And I don't really object to that in principle. I mean, you got to. I want the players to understand the kind of game they're about to play, but otherwise, fine. So, Cry Havoc. Yeah, I remember that. Was that a British game? Because I always assumed that it was, because it was in a weird packaging, as I recall. All right. Is the need to use tweezers a deal breaker? For some people, it absolutely is. We got a local guy who's like, I don't play tweezer games. And of course, that was part of the inspiration for the Tweezer Mafia t-shirt. It's available at the merch store, which is linked in the video description. So check that out. So, yeah, there's a whole bunch of eye complications that can arise from diabetes. So I'm not, mine are all, well, the good ones are all surgical tweezers too. But don't overthink that, okay? So I had a pair of tweezers like that. Those were the ones I just showed you. I didn't like the plastic parts on the end. Now, could you replace that thick plastic with something else, like a Plasti Dip or something like that? Possibly. That might be worth investigating, or some kind of spray, or even like a nail polish. Is there like a nail polish with some texture to it? Something like that. You could do something like that. Sklar brand forceps and had them bend out. Oh, yeah. So if you can, I don't have mine here. I know the tweezers John's talking about. I do like those situationally. I tend to prefer these for general use. However, if like that Atlantic Wall game where I'm sitting here and the counters are like right here and I can just doot, those tweezers were amazing in that situation. And I really liked it. So, all right, we're trying to catch up here. Supposedly this was going to ship like the week of Christmas. Now, I didn't believe that. But after I would have normally expected that to go, I just got my ASL journal today. Journal number 15. So, yeah. And I have a Stream Deck, so I should, thank you. You know who you are. I should do that, actually, to do a variety of different functions that I really haven't yet. And on the other hand, I do have the Stream Deck tied into OBS, but OBS doesn't control the stream. It just feeds the video to StreamYard. So, Dave D'Angelo says that tactical is no higher than platoon level, operational is no higher than divisional level. Well, so I would make the statement that a game like the company scale system or GTS, at the company level, you will occasionally see platoons in there too, but the vast majority of units in those games are companies. I would make the case that those are largely tactical games. Now, do they begin to blur the line? Sure, but I think they're more tactical than anything else. Similarly, one runs into a complication for operational if you arbitrarily draw the lines at divisions. What happens in the East Front, where you might have your German units might be divisions, but your Soviet units are corps, and the Soviet corps have approximately the same number of men in them as the German divisions, at least on paper. So there's an issue, there are, we can draw the lines wherever we like, I suppose, in the context of war games specifically. The way these terms get used professionally, there is a bit more rigorous. But if there's one thing we're not here on this show, it's professional. So, all right. Christoph says there was a flea market. This guy who sold tweezers. Ooh, tweezer man at the flea market. I suspect that there's some kind of use for these kinds of tweezers that is possibly either illegal or used to be, if you know what I'm saying. I don't know what that use would be, but I suspect that there might be, because I too have seen tweezer people at the flea market, and I'm not sure why. Justigard, this is a very interesting game. I did pick it up. I haven't done anything with it yet. Empire at Sunrise for Hollenspiel. John Gorkowski, is that a John Gorkowski game? It is strategic, operational, and tactical. It's World War I in the Pacific. So it's interesting on a topical basis. You see very few games on that. Additionally, the game itself looks interesting because of the 3 different scales that it runs at. Mark Herman says that Mark McLaughlin did, in fact, design Eastwind Rain. And somebody told me that there's some really neat, interesting mechanics in there. So, all right, we're trying to catch up on the chat here, and we are not doing that great. Carl Fung, welcome to the show. Accurate OOB does not necessarily mean breaking down to the lowest level. I agree. It means that you're portraying the game's units at the prescribed unit scale correctly. So, it's weird. I was doing it too. And my wife said, "You're going to start clipping your finger, you're like collecting toenails clippings now too." And I was like, it's that weird. It's not quite that. It's just as weird. It's just slightly less nasty. Any fantasies you may have had about making fire starters with paraffin and counter clippings is just dumb. Don't bother. Just throw them away. So since then, I have just thrown them away. So, but yes, Eric, it is weird. True realism is impossible. This is why I tend not to use the word realism when it might be applied to games, because I know what I mean when I'm applying it to a game when I say that OCS is realistic, right? That's something that I might think. I wouldn't probably say it because I avoid the term. Because people get the wrong idea. True realism is, of course, impossible anyway, but everybody knows that. It's what we used to call vacuously true in discrete math. So, well, I mean, there are definitely games that have gone into the nitnoidiest of the nitnoid levels, building their OOB to make sure that every single unit that operated independently at any point, even if it was way in the rear, is represented by a counter in the game, which creates, I think, historicity issues. And of course, you see, Europa being the obvious example. You see this where you've got these garrison units or police units or some bullshit rear echelon guys way in the back that get shipped off to the front line at the earliest opportunity, because why not? There are more speed bumps. So, excellent. Mike H. It remembers Archon. There have been I don't know about a lot, but there have been a number of man-to-man tactical games. Firefight, I think, was one. City Fight might have been. Sniper might have been, although I never played that. I never really looked at it, so I will be happy to be corrected on that. The dragon chess did feel a little bit like Star Trek 3D chess. So, I thought I said this. It was in issue 100 of Dragon Magazine. S2 Company released a book called Soldier Chess about 20 years ago, but renamed the pieces according to current forces. Oh, that's interesting. That could be fun. Also used a deck of cards for battlefield effects. If I were a particular fan of chess, which I am not particularly, I would temperamentally, not to say that all chess people would feel the same way, I would probably not want to do this. To add the cards, to rename the pieces, to me, that seems harmless. But to add a random event to chess, I think kind of defeats the purpose of playing chess. If you want a random element, play something different. Byron Salahar, welcome back to the show. Plays almost all tactical, which is I know a lot of people who play a ton of tactical and who would never really even consider playing a strategic game. That I have never heard talk about a strategic game or any of that. Then again, I hung out with a lot of OCS people, so there's that. The Forever War. I do remember this, and of course I've read the book. The book is pretty good, by the way. These are, well, other than the Beyond Valor box, which is there because that's what I'm clipping notionally. These are RPGs. So the way the reorganize, I did a little review of the reorg. I think I don't remember whether that was last week's show or the last show before that. But I showed some pictures. So basically, just for storage purposes, this isn't necessarily the best solution for filming, but we're working on that too. I've got all the RPGs here in the office, and all the war games that will fit are out in the game room. So just to kind of keep everything segregated. And I have managed, I did add some shelving technically, but it's only like 3 shelves on a shelf out here. So, but that just to keep everything as organized as possible. I don't agree with the statement, Stigler. I will clip GMT counters too. They're clean dog ears, but they're still dog ears, and I don't like dog ears. They make the counters harder to handle. So, and almost everything that you can see, except for everything that you can see is Traveler. The only stuff that's not Traveler is this shelf right here, which might get rearranged, who knows. And I do, thanks to adding a little bit of shelf space, I do have a little bit of breathing room on new additions. More so here than any other room. I got to figure out where to put the SPI flats. Those are still up on the top shelf. I think I know where to put them. I just have to clear that space off. Yep, exactly. Sitting right... Ooh, that's a good point. So right here, you can't see it because the camera is not pointing at it, is the ASL Nook. I've shown pictures of that before. I have seen people... I have never personally done this, but I have heard of people doing an RPG while they're in the car. Somebody will have to roll the dice. Obviously, the driver's not going to do it. But I've seen people do that. So why not? Okay. I mean, drive safely, though, right? Tweezer games. That's why we're the Tweezer Mafia around here. All right. DJ Flippy says, every counter-clipping argument should end after saying I do or I do not clip counters. I don't really feel like... I will make the statement that says, yes, I clip counters. I think it makes them... And I'll give another sentence that says why sometimes. I clip because I think it makes counters easier to handle and less prone to snagging on adjacent counters. If you have a different opinion, cool. If you come over here, you're going to play with clip counters, however. So there's that. All right, so Brant says, I asked about this 20 minutes ago. Original Medieval Man-to-Man Cry Havoc was a UK game. There's a sci-fi... And there was a number of other games in that line, too. He says there's somebody rebooting Cry Havoc. I think I did hear about that. Yes, I remember these. I remember the boxes because they were very... at least by American Hobby Store standards, they were very unusual boxes. This is the kind of thing I would do to annoy my wife. Such a nerd-tastic stream. Well, I'm glad you've come to the right place. So, you could totally do this. Don't be afraid to repurpose game components. For war games, I do a lot less of that, but there are also reasons why I have picked up a couple extra maps, including a full set of extra Europa maps, just to work on any hypothetical projects that might come up, for example. And I have, a lot of Europa maps. I've got 3 of some of them. I think the only maps I don't have duplicates of are the maps from Scorched Earth, I think. But for, one of the things that might hypothetically get noodled with on such a map would actually require those maps. So, Cardboard Commander, welcome to the show. All right, the Death Ride series. Neil Badkey mentions the Death Ride series from Grognard Simulations. It is platoon level. It is... I think you get counters for companies too, but you end up breaking a lot of them down into platoons. I think. I've never played that game series. I did have a copy of the Aris game, but I didn't really look closely at it, and it ended up getting pay it forwarded. Randy Modlin says Russian campaign where the Soviets are armies and Germans, of course, same deal, right? I think that Russian campaign to me feels up. It's probably strategic, but I feel like it feels operational to me because there's really no grand strategy or political angles. You're just trying to wipe the other guy out, pretty much, or grab the cities, one or the other. Remember, speaking of games with multiple scales in the box, remember one of the versions of Avalon Hill's Gettysburg was like that, where there was like there was like a basic game, a moderate game, and an advanced game, and the advanced game actually broke all the brigades into regiments, or at least some of them. Those are probably more expensive than the tweezers I'm buying for $1 at the flea market, I would think. I could be wrong. All right, but our games look nice, Stigler. That's one reason why we do it. There we go. or sandbags. Stigler, let us know if there's any flooding, and we'll put all of our counter clippings in big burlap sacks and ship them up to you. It's weird. I'm going to tell you. I did it, and I stopped. It's weird. I just don't, there's no reason for it, right? What are you going to do? Have keep getting bigger and bigger mason jars to put the clippings in, or have a whole shelf of mason jars full of counter clippings? This seems asinine. I think right around the time where I filled the mason jar up, which was like a standard canning jar, I think that's about the time my wife said something to me, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing anything with this. So the toenail clipping stream. Let's hope not. That's probably on YouTube. Thank you for destroying everyone's algorithm meandering, Mike. Now you're all going to get crusted toenails videos in the rest of your stuff. Military Chest, check out GHQ. This is worth a shot. Worth a look. I really haven't. Very good. Mark is playing For the People. Awesome. Awesome game. Dave says that Bruce Harper co-designed a chess variant that was called Sirawan Chess, now called Sirawan Harper Chess. There are a lot of chess variants floating around. Both the kind of the ones you hear about, like speed chess and stuff like that. Also, but there's a lot of other ones that you don't necessarily hear about unless you go looking for chess variants. Mark, the book I'm not very far into it yet, but I am enjoying the book so far. It looks like it is going to be fantastic. So, Single Soldier Games up front, and Victory Games Ambush, which also makes a lot of sense. Ambush was single man counters, as I recall. I never played Ambush either, so I am screwing this up. I'm putting the crews in with the half squads. because I am adult. SPI's Patrol, which I never really have looked at. The Harn and Rollmaster books are right here. There is no way for me to show you that, but they're on this entire wall, which is not that big of a wall, just so we're clear, has a 4x4 calyx and a 2x4 calyx, and then there's a row of books across the top, which is almost all RuneQuest. But on the RPG shelves in here, there's quite a bit of like a lot of RuneQuest. There's a lot of Call of Cthulhu, although not as a lot of people. I mean, I've got buddies who have like 10 times as much Call of Cthulhu stuff as I do. I've got plenty of Call of Cthulhu stuff by my standards. Pendragon, got a bunch of Harn stuff, got 2.5 cubes, Calyx cubes of Harn stuff. I've got about 2.5 of Ars Magica, miscellaneous stuff, bunch of the SPI RPGs over here, Chivalry and Sorcery, I got a lot of that. Here's my Rollmaster. Rollmaster is, plus Space Master, is 3 Calyx squares, 3.5, about 3 Calyx squares. There's not much MERP in there, but there is a little. I dumped most of the Pathfinder stuff. I had a lot of not a lot, but I had a decent number. I had probably another dozen books of Pathfinder First Edition, which I got rid of. I just kept the core book and the 2 bestiaries. That's plenty if I want to do something with it, which could happen, I guess. Weird things have happened. Tekkamol, there's most of a cube. Talislanta has most of a cube. D&D has 4 cubes, 4 Calyx cubes. The Calyx square compartments are 13 by 13, by the way. So let's try a little harder to get caught up. And then behind me is Traveler, and then just a few odds and ends, including the new Dune RPG from Modiphius, which I do like. So, Stigler, if you refresh, I'm pretty sure you'll see more than that. But do thumbs up the video, though, folks, if you are here. I appreciate it. So it makes the algorithm happy. Well, you know, that's the thing. The amount of, bear in mind, this is my second pass through this material. Okay. Although I didn't clip and organize everything back in the day, but I had a decent chunk of it clipped and organized, and I sold it all, of course, all in one big lot, for relative peanuts. And then I bought it all again over the course of several years. The new stuff tends to have more pieces in it than the old stuff. So the number of counters I have is just absolutely insane, like unpunched counters. And bear in mind, the Germans, all of Beyond Valor's punched, clipped, organized. A good chunk of Croix de Guerre is punched, clipped, and organized. A good chunk of King and Country, punched, clipped, and organized. But I got Italians and Germans and a bunch of historical Italians and Allied miners, which I haven't touched. I've got the Finns. I haven't touched those. The Chinese, the Japanese. Some of the Japanese half-inch counters are done, but the vehicles aren't. Now, what I have seen is people who use some kind of marker to color in the edge of the counter, and I think that looks really cool when done right. Every time I have experimented with that technique, it has looked like ass. And I'm not sure what those folks are doing. Oh, excellent. Cardboard Commander is going to have a video about the book, which is fantastic. I will probably have a video about, well, I'll definitely talk about the book when I do finish it. But remember, I'm reading 5 books right now. So there's that. So my progress on any of them is not incredibly fast. On the other hand, this week I'm doing a double commute. So there'll be about 8 hours of podcast listening happening. So I'll get the audiobook done. So that's cool. Well, yeah. Albrecht, thank you very much. I do appreciate it. I try not to be dismissive of these kinds of comments, but I also don't really seem to hear what other people seem to hear in my voice. So, which has been described in a number of ways, the only one of which I see is that I agree that I am loud. My wife is up the stairs and probably 60 feet away in the living room on the other side of the house, watching television right now, and she can probably hear me. So this is why Dan gets frustrated sometimes too, because you can't hear him self-talk over me. I just got it today, Doug Blair, the new special ops. So what's in there are 11 scenarios, some articles and stuff. The magazine's like 36 pages. It's not that big. There are 11 scenarios and 3 replacement overlay sheets for Doomed Battalions, the recent reprint of Doomed Battalions. Now, I bought a near complete core set of the Avalon Hill ASL stuff. So what wasn't in there was Armies of Oblivion and Parrot, because Avalon Hill didn't do it. And yeah, that's correct. And Paratrooper, just because he didn't have it. So I have like bags and bags and bags of reasonably, I mean, somewhat organized, or at least organized by unit type and nationality. Complete set of original ASL counters too. And I don't even clip in those. I'm not touching that stuff. Some of that's clipped already too. I do have the Swedish Volunteers module, and I'm glad I bought it because it sold out pretty fast, as I recall. I mean, if you can get this to work where it doesn't look like crap, good for you. But I have not managed it, and I have tried paint markers. I have tried just like regular markers. It doesn't seem to really work. So this might be required. So sometimes when I'm feeling probably a little bit irritable, and I'll be like at a Sheets or something waiting for my order, and there'll be some 16-year-old girl up at the counter saying 16, order number 16. And sometimes I will sigh to myself. I did this at Origins actually, and start going 16, order number 16's up, 16, hot stuff, get your food. So I have been known to do that. I think I'm louder than you, Mark, to be completely honest. You're not a super soft-spoken fella, but I tend to have a volume escalation thing going on, and that totally happens on this show too. And it also happens usually when Dan's on the show because I have to. I've seen all kinds of crazy stamp envelopes or pill boxes or match boxes. Whatever works, that seems like a pain in the ass to me. And I've got these trays. I like my storage solution for ASL stuff. So, well, there were some Swedish volunteers that fought in certain actions, and there are some scenarios about them, and about a half a counter sheet of Swedish counters. So, other than that, yeah, you're right. And I think they're all World War II scenarios. I'm not sure there's anything in there outside of World War II, but I could be wrong about that because I'd have to look at the scenarios again. Just organizing the friggin' scenarios. Jesus Christ. So, I believe Stigler might not know because he's not necessarily talking to GMT all the time, but I think it should be pretty soon. I believe it's at the printer, which means next couple of months in all likelihood. So. Cardboard Commander says there was a dude at the March Madness ASL tourney with all his ASL counters in match boxes. You can buy bulk match boxes. I don't know how economical that is. I've never investigated that. I don't want to use that method. So film, I've heard crazier stuff than film canisters. I don't know that it's optimal, but remember, you might have had a photographer in the family and had a friggin' drawer full of film canisters just sitting around doing nothing. So you might as well use them for something, right? I always went to baggies back in the day because at that point it wasn't necessarily easy to get counter trays. The first counter trays I bought as counter trays, as opposed to some came in a game, and I did have a couple of SPI things back in the day that did come with trays in the boxes, and occasionally Avalon Hill and Victory Games started putting trays in the boxes too. But those trays, I did not like those because the lids weren't attached, and frankly, the SPI lids didn't attach all that well either. I'm not talking about the flat trays. I'm talking about the trays that came like in the boxes, the soap boxes, for example. And even into the TSR days, they continued using what appear to me to be the same trays. But the first, I went and bought counter trays to have counter trays. I bought from the gamers. at an Origins in the early 90s or mid 90s, perhaps. So, hey, you can get, so the crack baggies, speaking of those, I bought some more of the baggies. So where I buy my baggies is Walmart, because they have these, they're in the craft and hobbies section, I believe, or something like that. Crafts and sewing section. They've got these in a bunch of different sizes, from about half this size to about 5 times this size. You can get them all very inexpensively. They're like $1.98 a bag. So if I'm there, presumably, these are the bags I was talking about. I have actually found a Wargame use for these, where you've got just like 2 or 3 counters. I can use one of these. My copy of Fatal Alliances uses a lot of those, actually, for like miners. Yep, that's a problem. We spilled some water. It's okay. I did say I took a couple early sips off the scotch. Amazon baggies might be cheaper. These are $1.98. So, and I don't have to wait for them. On the other hand, I've never been, oh my God, I gotta go to Walmart because I gotta get baggies, because I usually buy 2 or 3 if I'm there. I do really like the cube for me trays. So there's one moment. All right, so I have in the past done the 3D printed counter tray designs that are the sort of stack type of counter trays. And I've got the models available to patrons. They're in a Google Drive folder that patrons have access to. However, my printer will, even if it was working, will not accommodate 8.5 by 11 prints, right? The physical print bed is not large enough to do that. This fella has a bigger 3D printer, and he's selling these on Etsy. I will be doing a video. I'm not going to pull the link up right now because I don't have it handy, but I will be doing a video on these sooner or later. They are about $13 a piece. I think I might have got them on a sale price. They are magnetic, so this is 3 of them. They are tweezer trays, and they come in a couple different sizes. These are the ones for 1/2-inch counters. I bought these for Federation and Empire, which is otherwise a hopeless cause trying to store the thing. I don't want to break them. So, and I also, there we go. There will be a full a storage series video on those trays once I have gotten a little further along with them. They're a little bit finicky, just because of the kind of trays that they are, but mine aren't less finicky. So there's that. I do like certain aspects of my design better, but I also really like the magnetic lids. So the lids are separate. They cost about what the trays do. When I say tweezer trays, Jeff Beeler, I mean trays that you really need to use tweezers to get the counters in and out of. I'm okay with that because I'm a tweezer game guy. But some people won't. There we go. Yeah, no, it's friggin' hopeless. Also, a lot of Fed and Empire players. So a couple of observations. One, there is a vassal module. So I would probably recommend playing with the vassal module. A lot of like the hardcore Fed and Empire players who don't play on vassal, however, end up buying multiple sets of the counters, which you can get from ADB, just so that they can have enough counters for the games that they want to play. Remember, this is a big game, right? So now I like my trays too. That said, I really got to get the printer working. I'm about fed up with this. I don't like the Plano trays, but the biggest, because a lot of the local ASL people, maybe not all of them, but a lot of the local ASL people back in the day anyway, used the Plano trays for their ASL counters, and I thought it was they were way too bulky. They were way too coarse, as in not enough compartments. They just take up an enormous amount of space. I don't really like them for that reason. I like these container store trays better. They're kind of tweezer trays. It's nice. You don't need tweezers, but it's nice to have tweezers to get the counters in and out. I have My printer has, I want to say, a 9-inch by 9-inch print bed, something like that. It's a pretty standard starter 3D printer size. I have an Ender V3, Ender 3 V2 is what I have. So it's a pretty standard printer. It's a pretty standard bed size for a filament printer. You can get bigger ones. They're just more expensive, right? And I do like, I still get plenty of use out of GMT trays. And thank God, I've got a local buddy who is moving away from GMT trays in favor of baggies. And I'm getting all his extra GMT trays, which is great. I'm going to use them. They're no longer my favorite trays. Well, they were never my favorite trays. They were just the trays I could get. I do think the Cube for Me trays are better. I might like the Aegis trays better too, particularly the magazine size trays, which I really like. And the half-size tray, which adds a lot of additional flexibility. But with Cube for Me, you've got a variety of different sizes and stuff like that and configurations, so you can really kind of create a custom storage solution for whatever game it is you're trying to store. Somebody on Facebook was showing off their Cube for Me kit for Labyrinth, for example, with all the current expansions and all of that stuff. I have some of those too. Not my favorite trays. Not my favorite trays. I will use them for Avalon Hill games or Victory games because they fit in a box. So there's that. Racco trays are really nice, but they're also really very expensive. And it's not like you buy one, right? It's like you have to buy a couple of the bricks that have like the rack and 4 trays and all that. You need like 6 or 8 of those. So you're spending like $1,000 on containers for Racco storage. They're nice, but it's really expensive. I've gotten stuff from Ritterkrieg before, though. And he's the best, he or they, whatever, are the best people to get those trays from domestically, because they're a European tray. Oh, I've got 2 of these. Of course. Something I noticed, though, where were we playing this? I think this came up in our GCACW game at last Winterfest. So the bottom, like the spinning part under the bubble, is covered in like this friction powder. It almost looks like flocking. It's a green flocking. It sort of feels like felt, but it has worn off from the dice spinning so often. So that is a potential issue. With that particular device. I favor dice towers personally. So the shipping and time to get them from Poland is surprisingly reasonable, in both situations. So, you Quinto trays. Ooh, boy. Okay, no. I'm not a fan of those either. I got all of War in Europe in 3 Cube for Me trays. Now, I did use I've also, do I have any of these handy? I probably do somewhere. So I designed these, there's cat hair all over these little spacers. They're like 0.4 millimeters thick or something, maybe 1 millimeter thick. And you can drop them into either the GMT tray sized ones. And you can turn your 1 GMT compartment into up to 3 compartments, and therefore get more granularity in your organization. I designed these for the Cube for Me trays as well. All of this is on the file repository for Swordsman level patrons and up, by the way. And I've found these enormously useful. I normally print these in like batches of 13. So, and it takes like an hour or something like that. So you can like run a job, go to lunch, come back, you'll have 13 more of these. And they really do help a lot. And it was thanks to these things that I managed to get all of War in Europe into 3 Cube for Me trays. So we need some water here. We got about 10 minutes left. I do have Columbia Games. I should have mentioned this in the news. Columbia Games either has live right now or will be launching very soon a Kickstarter for a new deluxe edition of Quebec 1859, which is the first block war game. It is a absolute classic, and it is worth a look whenever it goes live. I got a video coming for that, so check the video out when it happens. I don't know that it's particularly, but I don't know that we're being particularly dorkier than we normally are then. So my biggest counter trade disappointment were the DVG trays. which I was like, wow, what a great idea this is. And then they just suck. The lids don't attach, so they're useless. 17, what did I say? Did I say 1859? I'm not sure what was going on in Quebec in 1859, to be fair. So, well, this is another advantage, if you think about it, of playing on Vassal, especially for those games where all the written material is available, like the rules in a playbook and stuff like that. You might never touch your physical pieces. I would encourage it as a point of honor that if you are playing games on Vassal, that somebody at that virtual table should own the game. I think there are reasons why that might not be the case, like it's a game that's been out of print for 30 years, for example. But I think as a point of honor, people should own the game. That said, you could keep your game in really nice condition if you play it on Vassal instead. Oh, yeah, that's true. Ooh, yes, those weren't disappointing, though. Those were just shitty. I don't like the ATO magazine trays. They make no sense at all to me unless they're stored flat, which makes no sense at all to me. So, then again, a lot of people store their games flat. I don't like to store the games flat because of dishing. This particularly happens with flat games, Avalon Hill flat games, the GDW flats. The SPI plastic flats don't really dish, but they have other problems, including the fact that sometimes the plastic is completely brittle. Oh, that's true. The Gettysburg Solitaire game is on Kickstarter now as well. I should actually look into all of those. I was doing very well about letting people know about Wargaming Kickstarters, and then I stopped. Not exactly. They are no longer offering a subscription option because they expect to not be running forever. Winding down is maybe not the right word. I do like the Aegis trays, especially for big counters. I will agree with that. I never did make the separator, the compartment separators for the Aegis trays, though I meant to, but I don't have enough Aegis trays. Mark, I've got like 12 SPI flats, all of which have been acquired in the last couple of years, well, maybe 5 or 6 years. And they are in a completely wide variety of conditions. Some of them are pretty nice, other than the cardboard bottom falls off, which, I mean, that glue was just not great, and just the bottom just falls off. I don't do anything special to fix that. I just put some Elmer's glue all on it and glue it back together. It's fine. Worse is where you get the situation where the plastic has become super duper brittle. And I've seen this where somebody decided, if you remember the SPI flats, do I have a blank one? I might. I do. I have an empty one. So this is in pretty good shape. I got this from Noble Knight. You could see that so there's this exterior plastic clamshell, right? And then there's the cardboard thing on the bottom, which is really just a stiffener. So you just glue it back on. It's fine. But then you've got the compartments, and you have these plastic trays. But these don't latch in or anything. If I turn this upside down, these are just going to flop all over the place. What I have seen people do is seal this with duct tape. And it's like, oh, God, what a disaster. So I'm going to get another one of these, and then I'm going to put my copy of Objective Moscow in it. That was my reason for ordering an empty SPI flat tray. I don't have a cover sheet for it, but I think it was actually the Ziploc version, because you could buy those. And they did just finish a Kickstarter, yeah. So I wouldn't worry about ATO going away anytime soon. They've kind of made it clear that it's not necessarily a forever operation at this point. Yes, I had this I'm not sure that they're all like this, but mine were like this as well. I was pretty disappointed. It's, and it's disappointing, especially because I think it's great that they thought to include counter trays with the game. That is fabulous. I'm not sure you can get that game in 2 counter trays, but even so, I appreciate it. But then the lids don't snap on. I can still use them for something. I can use them for counter sorting, if nothing else. But I am not a fan of those. The TSR trays. These were the plastic on the SPI. They're the same trays as far as I could tell. And West End may have used similar trays as well. They were really thin, but I have a couple of the GMT ones I have, which are admittedly probably 30 years old, are also super thin. Now, this is true, but very seldom do you see those plastic strips that used to hold the cover on. Very seldom do you see those on an SPI flat game that you buy today. If you still have them, cool. And of course, you could come up with something similar to that, and that will keep everything in the tray. But that wasn't the point. The point, you can live with because you got to store the flats flat anyway, right? So that doesn't bug me too much. But sealing them up with duct tape is absolutely insane. All right, I feel like I'm missing something here as well. So, in any case, the little circle where you put the dice, yeah, and there was no cover for that, by the way. So there's that. So I will accept that there's politics happening in Canada right now, and not say anything about it because I don't know anything about it. In any case, so hopefully Thursday this week we will have. I think I'm going to move the unboxings to Wednesday, but it's not going to be ready for Wednesday. Probably, it's not going to be ready for Wednesday. I'll have that. Another unboxing, and I'll probably do a video on the ASL Journal as well, just to go through it for people who are on the fence about it. The later ones did have... I'm not positive these were Avalon Hill trays at that point. I think they were at that point. No, okay, I do know the ones you're talking about. Yeah, okay. Because there were the ones with usually an opaque bottom and a clear top, and there was like completely separate pieces. But then later we started to see the ones with the hinge, and the later ones of those did have the little plastic tabs that you could use to close it. So, all right, yeah, I'll take a look. Thanks. So, all right, folks, I think we are pretty close to wrapping it up here. So check out all whatever videos I do this week. Let me put it that way. I'm a little pooped. Some of the later ones did. I do remember this. There was some kind of, you could sort of twist and tuck the plastic of the lid under the plastic of the tray. I do remember that. I didn't like them because of the catapult problem. So, all right, I think we're going to wrap it up here, folks. We're a couple minutes early, but that's fine. I'm awful tired and got a long day ahead of me tomorrow. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Don't forget to check out the links in the video description to help support the channel. Everybody who is here also supported the channel, so I am very happy about that. I want to wish everybody a great rest of the week. Tune in on Thursday evening for the Chit Show. I believe we have a guest lined up. Just waiting for the verification on that, and I think it will be very exciting for everybody involved. So see you then, and stay tuned.